think it's important to talk about the co-parenting strategy of Plan B and why it works. And it's probably the most difficult skill to acquire and learn and use consistently, would you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, Rick, explain what a Plan B is and how parents use it.
So the idea is most of the time, it's not unusual to feel powerless in a situation with the other co-parent, especially when trying to negotiate. And so we get in a position where we want them to do the right thing. We, of course, think they should do the right thing and put the children first. And so we find ourselves arguing and trying to persuade and trying to convince and we just get all wrapped up. Well, all that does is empower the other.
Hey, this is Diane Rick.
And I'm Rick Voiles.
We've been working with co-parents in conflict for more than 2 decades. We've taught classes, written books, counseled parents, empathized, and agonized a few times to help people make sense of their complicated families.
We were talking one day, and it occurred to us that helping the most difficult cases comes down to one simple concept. Is one parent willing to let go of the tug-of-war rope, or is it worth it to hold on and fight?
So we invite you to take this journey with us each episode as we tackle the questions, should you hold on or let it go? Welcome to Co-Parent Dilemmas, where we give you practical solutions to those impossible co-parents. It is Thursday afternoon, Rick.
It is.
Not even 5 o'clock, and it's dark.
It is dark.
I hate that.
And we don't say good morning, Diane.
I know. It's good evening. I'm tired.
Good evening. Good evening. Yes.
Good evening.
Yeah, I wonder if you can tell a distinct difference in our voice when we record in the afternoon versus probably because
I also think I'm brighter in the morning and less negative. So if I sound negative, it's because I'm tired. I tend to get whiny as the day goes on.
Okay. And today, folks, we have a very short episode.
I'm kind of just going to tell it like it is and get off.
Oh, boy. All right.
Yeah, it's been one of those weeks, right? There's lots of putting out fires among people. So I don't have a good news story today, which is my fault for not investigating, but you had a great dad joke.
Oh, oh, yeah. It's, we all know Karl Marx, famous figure, but most people don't know his sister, Anya. Mm-hmm. She invented the starting pistol.
That wasn't a dad joke. That's a bad adult joke.
That's a bad joke. Uh-huh.
Okay. But the point is, if anybody laughs, then they are out of their depression. If they're in depression, maybe for a few moments. All right.
Yeah. No, it took me a moment when I first heard it. On your marks. That was.
And whose gets set then?
I don't know. Yeah.
Whose daughter is that? Oh boy, we are corny at the end of the day. Dear. I like to every once in a while highlight some good reviews that we get. We do occasionally get a couple of negative reviews, but they're mostly good, would you say?
Yeah.
And so we got one from Jack, and our listeners may remember Jack, who does the Silver Bullet Survivor podcast.
Yes.
So I just thought we would read that on air. And if you're interested in Jack's Silver Bullet Survivor podcast, where he talks about a lot of the subjects that we talk about from a parent's point of view, which I think is a really cool companion to what we do, because you're getting maybe the professional point of view from us, but then the parent point of view from Jack. So go ahead and read that. And then I'll put a link to Jack's podcast in our show notes.
Perfect. All right. Jack says, just wanted to send you a quick note that I loved your latest episode on feelings. My latest episode also talked a bit about feelings pertaining to drama and PTSD. And I think we have a lot of overlap. It seems like we are in sync. Absolutely love the feelings, thoughts, values, pyramid framework. Thank you for all that you do, Jack.
Great. Thank you, Jack, for all that you do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today is the third in our three-part series about the whys behind critical co-parenting skills. The first episode was about the feelings, and episode number 2 was about communication or the email protocol and why it works. Today, I think it's important to talk about Plan B, not the birth control, but the co-parenting strategy of Plan B and why it works. And it's probably the most difficult skill to acquire and learn and use consistently, would you say?
Yeah, but definitely.
Yeah. So, Rick, explain what a Plan B is and how parents use it.
So the idea is most of the time, it's not unusual to feel powerless in a situation with the other co-parent, especially when trying to negotiate. And so we get in a position where we want them to do the right thing. We, of course, think they should do the right thing and put the children first. And so we find ourselves arguing and trying to persuade and trying to convince and we just get all wrapped up. Well, all that does is empower the other person. Sometimes that they're doing it just because they know it drives us crazy, or they enjoy watching us, get all frustrated and upset. If you're in a negotiation situation like that, where the outcome depends upon the other person agreeing with your proposal or suggestion, that's considered a plan A. Mm-hmm. So a plan B is any negotiation that you have with the other person that you already have something in place that you can do that will satisfy the need if the other person says no. So I could want something for my child and I could be asking the other parent and they go no. Well, I'm not without recourse. I have a plan B. Plan B means, well, here's what I'm going to do. I don't really need you.
Right. That doesn't mean that you no longer communicate with your ex, or you don't take their opinions into consideration. All those things. What it means is that if you can get outside of your own head about the past and about the emotions and how they always trigger you and blah, 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 and really begin to think about your child's needs, there is always a plan B.
Always.
So at the end of this segment, I'll say this again, but I want our listeners to be thinking about it. I would like to invite our listeners to give me a scenario to which they believe there is no possibility of a plan B. And let's see if they can trip us up.
Ooh.
Because I am making the claim that if you have a situation that does not include child abuse, okay.
Oh, wow.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, yeah. Obviously, but that's
right.
If you don't give all the disclaimers, then people say, aha, I've got you on this one. Right. But if it doesn't include child abuse, but it includes practical things that you do negotiate, right? You don't negotiate emotional or physical abuse of any kind. But if you're needing to negotiate something and you're worried that your co-parent is just going to shut down every possibility that would be good for your child, then let us know and we'll try to be helpful, either on air or I'll write you back and say, here's your plan B. Keeping in mind that sometimes the plan B I may suggest or you may think of is not most ideal.
Definitely. It's not. Right.
There are ideal solutions in a perfect fantasy world, which we do not live in. So there are good, better, best solutions. But at the same time, I recently posted this. It was a repost on Facebook and it says, parents, spend less time removing the mountains in your child's life and spend more time teaching them how to climb. You will not always be there, but the mountains will.
Cool.
So what that means, if you take that wisdom into consideration along with the plan B, that sometimes you can't always do the absolute ideal thing for your child, but ideal isn't always best for your child because sometimes your kids just need to learn about disappointment.
Right.
You know, I think in our world right now, especially with everything that's gone on in our country, there's a lot of people very, very, very disappointed. And I'm seeing all kinds of different ways that people deal with disappointment. And I'm kind of disappointed about how people are dealing with disappointment. You know what I mean?
You're handling it very well, I have to say.
I know. I mean, life is disappointing sometimes. And so kids sometimes do have to learn that they can't control everything.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes a plan B is nothing more than a conversation you have with your child.
Yeah.
Because you can't make it all better. But that's still an acceptable plan B.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to make this okay for my child? If the first thought is, well, I'll just take him or her to court and I'll fix this and make sure my child gets everything he or she wants.
Yikes.
But in the process, you hurt your child in worse ways than what you actually tried to achieve in court. Going to court, that could be way worse than plan B.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Even if you won, it could be way worse. Yeah.
Right. So I thought it would be helpful to give some examples today of what we mean by plan B. You agree?
Yeah, definitely.
What's a good example?
So one of the ones that
the birthday party,
but also my ex put my child in a little league or soccer league that's way far away, and I can't make it to the practices or I can't make it to the games, and they did it on purpose. And
yeah, that's a good one. We hear that a lot, that he or she is purposely involving my child in choir on Sunday afternoon, meaning I have to take my kids back earlier. I've got to drop them off at the church and she picks them up at the church. And I don't like that because it's my time.
Right.
Or like you said, the baseball team is, 45 minutes away. And by the time I get there after work, half the game is over. And that's just not fair to me. We hear that a lot. And we're not here to say that that doesn't happen, that people don't purposely over involve their kids to keep them from spending time with you.
Right.
Does it happen? Of course it does. But the question is that something you go to court over? And by the time you win the court case, the kid has decided, I don't even like baseball.
Right. Yeah.
And they're on to doing basket weaving. I don't know. And then what was the point? Right. And so the point I'm trying to make around all that is that a plan B in that situation is not going to court. That would be the last resort.
Mm-hmm.
What's plan A? Oftentimes it's a fantasy or a pie in the sky, because plan A is, oh, I'll just call my co-parent and we'll talk through this and we'll both agree on what our child needs. And he or she, I'm sure, will understand my point of view and we will fix this situation.
Obviously, see reason, right? Yeah.
And for some parents, that works. For a small percentage of divorced parents. Why doesn't it work for most divorced parents, Rick?
Oh, they're already angry, or many times someone is still stuck in the punishment stage. They're angry and they're going to do what they can to cut the other parent out of their lives and out of my child's life, and putting them way far away in an extracurricular activity limits your access to them. And they just stay stuck in that punishment.
And I do understand that the parent who feels victimized by that is also worried that the child is going to hear from the other parent. If your dad really loved you, he would show up at your games on time. If your mom really cared about you, she would support your choir activities at church, but she just doesn't care about you. So you feel compelled somehow to just follow with the plan because you have this fear that if you don't, the wrong message will be sent to your child, which is a valid fear, right?
Yep.
because that does happen as well. So you can get angry and sad and say, this is wrong. And, I'm going to talk to your mom about moving your baseball closer to me, or, which probably isn't a good idea because the kid has little probably control over that, right?
Right.
Or you can get into a big giant fight about it, make mom really mad that you're mad, and then who knows what she'll say to the child, or that she'll just dig her heels in. Well, next season I'm going to go 2 hours away.
There you go.
Like that. Right?
Yep.
And here's the thing: as professionals, we know this. We if you hear that one side, you're going, well, yeah, that's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to the other side, which when you do parenting coordination, you hear both sides, right? Then you go to the other side, and what is mom likely to say about this conflict? Is she going to admit that, yeah, I'm trying to keep the kid from dad?
No.
What is her plausible reasoning for what she's doing?
Oh, this is a better league, a better coach. It's a better team. There's all kinds of, this is more convenient to me as far as distance is concerned.
And Johnny wants to do it because his best friend is playing
Right.
on that team, and he doesn't know anybody on the rec league team or the local school team, and he really wants to play with the other little kid. So there's always going to be a reason that is not admitting guilt, right?
Right.
It's going to be. So I want you to think about how that plays out in court. It becomes a he said, she said about what's best for the child. Is there any one best thing for the child in this scenario?
No.
There are many best things.
Yes.
So it's one of those scenarios. It's not like something that's cut and dry, like a medical issue where a doctor says this child has this condition and this is the medication. That's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
That's why we defer to medical opinions about stuff like that, right? Now, some conditions have multiple possibilities, but things like this don't. So if you think about how might my child be hurt by this, what are the answers to that question? How might my child be hurt by the conflict around this?
Well, all I wanted to do was play baseball. And now the two people that I love are fighting with each other, and it's all my fault. Is going to end up being one possible.
And is it plausible that the child really does want both of his parents there to watch him play baseball?
Sure. That would be ideal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And is it, I don't know, this is very different than when my kids were coming up, but a lot of parents today, you don't only go to the baseball game, you go to every practice.
Yes.
Right? Which I have an issue with because I was a kid once and I was glad for my parents to not be around all the time because then I could act out with my friends.
Have fun. Right? Yeah.
So this idea that you're somehow a very bad parent if you don't go to every possible practice and every possible game is, I think, manufactured by parents. I don't really think that's a child's point of view, that I need my dad there at every game so he can watch every practice so he can watch everything I'm doing so that he can tell me what I'm not doing right and then yell at me because I'm fooling around with my friends instead of listening to the coach. And,
right.
So what we perceive our kids really need and want from us can be a little skewed by what we really want, especially after divorce.
Oh, yeah.
Because it seems to me when you're married, mom and dad tag team this whole thing a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hey, I can't go to the practice. Can you go? Yeah, I'll be there. Okay, cool. Hey, tell Johnny I'll be at the game, halfway through. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
How does that change after divorce?
You don't love our child. You're a terrible parent.
Yeah, there are opportunities to weaponize those kinds of things. So dad could go to court and say, this is wrong and you need to force mom to make sure that activities are always within a certain radius of my home. I don't know how you do that. But what are some other plan Bs that dad might consider?
Well, and I do want to make this point. There's more than one plan B.
Sure.
And this is a skill. This is not obvious. You really have to stretch a creativity muscle that maybe you haven't had to stretch before because you were in a cooperative or we did a tag team. And so, somebody you could rely on. Now that you can't, you're going to have to develop this kind of a skill. So there's always going to be one. There's always going to be something you could do. Some are going to be more inconvenient and more fair than others. But so the point is that my child probably wants me involved in something that my child enjoys. And so I can be involved and show interest in my child's progress and their excitement in ways at my house. We could practice. I could get a coach that I could take them to here in a specific area, maybe batting or hitting or fielding or throwing, and participate, even though I'm not at that practice or not at that game.
Hey, listeners, you've heard me talk about the daily devotional for frustrated co-parents that I'll be releasing January 1st. Some of you have responded with interest in a subscription, so thank you. Starting this week, you can officially subscribe online. Since the holidays are near, consider giving yourself the gift of daily faith encouragement, as well as a few tips and skills from my archives thrown in there. You might also know someone on your gift list who could benefit. If so, check out the links in the show notes. And happy holidays. So you're saying there are many ways to be involved in that activity.
Yes.
There's not only one way. I agree. There's also many ways for a parent to see that game without being there.
True.
You could have another parent videotape every time your child is up at bat, or out in the outfield, catching the ball. Or whatever.
Yeah.
So that you say to your child, I don't want to miss anything. I'm not going to be able to get there to every game because of my work or because of the distance from home, but I'll try to make as many as I can. But the ones I can't, Miss Jones is going to videotape you when you're up and then send it to me. It's so easy to do these days. It's not like you have to carry around a big giant thing on your shoulder, a little iPhone, you just lift it up and boop.
Oh, you get a drone. Let the drone go out and have somebody play with it. You can see the whole game.
High tech. So I think that's a good option.
Yes.
And, our experience, Rick, when we have done parenting coordination and we talk about this, at least this has been my experience, when you start telling people this about plan B, there's always, I know, but right. I know, but I don't know anybody on the team. Well, get to know somebody.
There you go.
Well, I know, but there's just no way I'll make any game. Well, okay, then, there's a lot of excuse making about why plan A is the only plan. When we're saying, no, there's something in the middle. There is a plan B. Even if, or you said this before too, Rick, if dad really desperately wants to be there, he could alter his work schedule.
Sure.
I mean, It depends on how important it is to you.
Yep.
If it's that important to you, I don't know if it's that important to your child, if you can explain to your child the situation, but if it's that important to you and you have the opportunity to change your work schedule, go in and talk to your boss.
Yep.
Say, hey, I only have this time once in my kid's life, and I really want to be able to be there. Is there some way we can alter the schedule? So again, thinking outside of the box. Not just assuming that if she doesn't do what I need her to do, then somehow my child won't be okay. And then we're going to end up in court.
Yeah.
Is a bad assumption.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, though, if dad can't find a way to do any of that, a simple conversation with the child can be really, really helpful.
Yes.
Sitting down with Johnny, and how you talk about it, you don't say, well, Johnny, your mom has done it again. She has once again alienated me from your activities, and therefore I am not going to get to go to any. No. How do you talk to your child about that, Rick? If you were a dad and you had to sit down with your kid and explain this, divorce is not always convenient.
Yeah. And first of all, I would want to find some baseline of what the child feels about it.
Okay.
I mean, if it's really important to the child, then that's going to frame, I realize this is important to you. And I realize you've got a dream of being a professional baseball player, and that's important to me too. And because that's the overall goal, there'll be plenty of opportunities for me to help you with that in other ways. But right now, it's not going to be possible for me to XYZ.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And you just like we've said before, sometimes it's important to talk to your kids about these things because they might shock you in their answers.
Yeah.
He may say, Dad, I hate baseball. I'm only doing it because my mom wants me to, and I'm probably not going to do it next year. So don't waste your time.
Right.
Is it possible?
It is.
It's possible. So you don't know until you ask, hey, I want to talk to you about your baseball. I really want to be at every game, but I don't know how you feel about that. Sometimes kids don't want their parents at every game. Maybe that makes you nervous. How do you feel about that? I think it's a great opening line. And then hear what he has to say. And if he says, oh, I really want you to be there. And then you can say, well, I'm going to try as much as I can, but because of my job and where the games happen, I may not be able to get there to every game, but I want you to know that I care about every game.
Yeah.
So I've asked Miss Jones or Miss Smith or whoever, Mr. So-and-so, to videotape when you're up. And then when you come see me next, we can look at it and I can see what you've done. And, if we need some coaching, we can bat the ball around in my yard or whatever. What you're doing is you're saying it matters to me.
Yes.
And I can't always control these things, but we can find a way to make it important.
That's the skill you want to model for your child.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I think we've talked about this before, but for listeners that are maybe listening for the first time, or even if you're not, we're going to, the whole birthday party thing, right?
Right.
I mean, because it's such a good example when, mom says dad won't let Johnny go to his best friend's birthday party because dad is very protective of his time. And if it falls on his day, he's always going to say no. And you've talked about the teenager that you knew at one time where dad wouldn't let her go to the prom because that's my weekend. Some people are very, very protective of the weekend to the point where it's about them completely and not at all about the child just being normal and doing normal child things like going to a birthday party. And I realize there are 1,000 birthday parties and your kid doesn't have to go to every single birthday party he's invited to because that can get expensive, right? But, it's my best friend or my next door neighbor. I want to be there. And mom gets frustrated. And mom says her plan A is to make sure that kid gets to that party at all costs. That's her plan A. Because in her mind, my son deserves this. He needs this. It's ridiculous if he doesn't go. So we're going to make it happen.
Yes.
And how does she try to make it happen?
She calls dad and guilts and shames him into it. If you were any kind of a decent father, you would, your child's over here crying and you don't care. And
either that or she begs and then just says, you don't have to do anything. I'll do everything. I'll go and pick up the gift. I'll drive him to the party. I'll pick him up. I'll bring him back to your house. You won't have to lift a finger if you just let me have my way.
Yep.
And where does dad feel his power?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm ruining her life. I'm making her jump up and down. This is, I love this power of driving her crazy.
The power of no.
Yes.
And I've heard this a million times. He or she only says no because they can.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it represents that judge gave me power over this. And I get to exert my power. That's different from what we talk about and how important it is just follow the plan to stay out of conflict.
Right.
And people use the plan, even though it would be helpful to let your child go to the birthday party, and your plan doesn't say you must do that, but it would be a good idea if it's an important party that you let your child go there. So mom could do those two things, either rant and rave and guilt him or, try to be sweet as honey, hoping that he'll just let her do all the work and get it done. And he still says no. So mom has a couple of choices. Is she going to go to court over that?
I hope not.
She could, but again, it's one of those things where it's subjective, right?
Yeah.
There's no research that says kids who fail to go to birthday parties are going to be, damaged for life. So it's kind of a no-brainer that you just have to let your child be disappointed. However, you don't have to just say, I guess you're just going to be disappointed.
No.
A plan B might be talking again, talking to your child.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry when you're your dad's, he really likes the time with you and he feels like he's competing with other people's invitations. And so that's his choice that he wants you with him instead of at the party. So what I thought I would do is call this child's mom and see if we can't have our own little party next time you're at my house so that you can at least celebrate with him.
Right.
That won't be ideal. If you want a couple other friends coming over, we can have a little, mini party.
Mm-hmm.
And your child may say, no, 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 that's all right. Okay. Or he might say, that sounds great. Yeah, I'll do that. Either way, what has mom said to the child? What's the message to the child?
I hear what's important to you, and I will do everything in my power to make those things happen for you.
Yeah.
There's always a way. We'll work on it together.
Yeah. There's an answer in there somewhere. We can find it. It's not what you want to do. You want to be at the real party with your whole classmate,
right,
room of classmates and all of that, but you don't always get everything you want. So it could be the same message dad is sending by saying no to the kid.
True.
But it's in a way that says, but I hear you. And we're going to tweak it and do it a little differently so that you can still honor your friend. So like we talked about in the feelings thing, you're listening to the feelings, you're acknowledging them, and then you're working through options. And then you're saying the value is not in the party. The value is in honoring your friend.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless he says, no, the value's in the party. These two girls are going that I know you won't let me invite to my house.
It's still not the party. I mean, we could find another way.
So those are two very common and I might say kind of innocuous examples of how to use the plan B.
Sure.
And there are also more complex ones, more difficult ones, especially when your child feels hurt by the other parent in other ways that the only thing you can do is help talk them through that hurt. But that is a valid plan B.
So let's get a little more complicated and let me put you on the spot because I know you have experience of a plan B around finances.
I do.
Yeah, and your mortgage payment.
Oh, yes.
Which I thought worked out brilliantly. And
it was the only, so in my personal situation with my co-parent years and years and years ago, I found that he got a lot of power, felt a lot of power on always paying the child support after the date he knew I needed to pay my mortgage. Because a big chunk of that child support went to paying my mortgage. Let's just say, I don't remember, it's been so long ago that, your mortgage payment is due on the 1st, but you have until the 10th to, without penalty. And I would get the check on the 11th, And he knew that I was paycheck to paycheck. And I worked my butt off to save, put away money to have one whole extra payment ahead. And I think back then it was like $800 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember making that payment early. And then him not giving my check until the 11th, the day after the date it's due. And I didn't say anything because up to that point, I'm like, it's getting close to the 10th, it's the 8th, it's the 9th. When am I going to get the check? I kind of need the check. And he loved that.
Yes.
When I stopped communicating about it, over time, the checks started coming earlier and earlier. That doesn't mean he didn't use other things to try to take power, right?
Right.
But I remember thinking, this is very interesting. That when I stopped asking for something, he no longer was getting a reward.
True.
From the asking. So then it became, oh, well, heck, I might as well just pay it. I think he ended up putting it on some, regular payment plan or whatever. So he didn't have to think about it anymore because he wasn't getting his cookie. I wasn't handing him a whole bag of Oreos every time he tried this. It was kind of like, well, what's happening? And then, of course, narcissists are very creative and came up with some other way to try
Sure.
to take power, right? And so it is kind of like a chess game. I hate to say it, but it is of,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to thwart that move. And then I've got to wait for the next one and see how I'm going to work around that, and I hate to say it's a game because there isn't a winner, but there is for your kids if you can play that game of life and get through it without anybody losing their queen,
Right.
or getting checkmate. So,
And
which,
we often hear, well, that's an awful lot of effort. That's an awful lot of work, and it ends up being inconvenient and unfair. Why can't he just do
yeah,
the right thing?
yeah,
And
or that's not fair. Why
that's
should
not fair.
I have to do it? Well,
Right.
it's not fair.
Nope.
Why do you have to do it? Because kids need one of you to do the right thing, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, it sucks that you have to be the one, you have to be the adult and say, okay, what do I need to do so that in my case about the child support, it was about my own personal peace and not having to deal with it month after month after month.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just needed to put that to rest. But when it comes to your kids, it's really about saying, what can I do for them so they don't have to worry about it, lose
Hmm.
sleep about it at night? At least I'm having a conversation saying, hey, I don't know what your dad or mom's going to do, but here's what I'm willing to do. And these, as kids get older, the problems become more complicated. Well, I want a car.
Right.
Dad said he'll buy me a car, or mom said she'll buy me a car, but they won't pay the insurance. I mean, the issues just get more and more complicated. But like I said, there's always that, let's think outside the box. Let's negotiate with our teenager. Let's find out how much of it, we had a whole episode about that. How much of it can you contribute to? And
Right.
I'll contribute to, and we'll work together. And then maybe we don't even need the other parent to weigh in
Precisely.
on this.
Yes.
So that's where I think parents have to be a little bit more creative than they normally would be when their emotions are triggered. And like we said on the feelings episode, when your emotions are triggered and you live there,
Yeah.
you can't get to those options because it requires your logical brain to be in play.
And these are leadership skills that you are teaching your child, modeling. And every time there's a crisis, you sit down together and go, okay, there's a solution here somewhere. Let's find it. When they get older and they're able to come to difficult situations in life, in the community, and have that presence and say, hey, there's a solution here. Let's figure it out together. They're going to be a gift to society.
Right, right. If it's something you do for many years, it will have a very positive effect, not only on your child's experiences in the moment, but on what you're teaching them
Yeah.
overall.
And what they'll teach their kids. And I mean, yeah, this is a little over the top, but I mean, you're actually creating somebody who's going to have a big impact, a positive impact on the people around them.
Yeah.
So you're not just sacrificing for now in this moment.
Yeah. And it does teach a certain amount of resiliency, that when we can't figure out a problem, we just go ask a judge to figure it out for us. And they hate
Mm-mm.
that.
Mm-mm.
Judges will punish you because they hate that so much, right? So that's not necessarily, that shouldn't be ever thought number one. So let's talk about a plan B.
Yeah.
And how can I engage the plan B? And that requires you to be able to engage the analytical parts of your brain.
Yes.
Which means you've got to not let the other parent trigger you emotionally about it. And I think there's just a lot of peace. I think what you said earlier, Rick, is if I walk into a negotiation saying, if here's what I'm going to ask for, but if they say no and won't agree to anything I ask for, I can say, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Because I already know what I'm going to do when they say no.
Right.
Then I don't walk into the negotiation with my hopes up. And then my hopes get dashed. And then I feel depressed again. And I walk out of there and I'm beaten down one more time. That's a terrible way to live.
Right.
So it's a way to negotiate without really negotiating.
And I want to drive that home. The goal here is not that, oh, I've got this plan B. I never have to negotiate with my ex now. Why even try? No, you might get what you want, and it might be more ideal. The point isn't that you don't have to negotiate anymore. The point is that no matter what happens, it doesn't bother you.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter. And you might be surprised if you stop fighting their no, they're going to realize how ridiculous they're being, and they'll come to the table.
Possibly, yeah.
And say, I've been thinking about it. Maybe I will do that thing you asked, because there's no reward in you walking away from the table with a smile on your face.
Exactly.
They lose the whole power reward when you do that.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, cool. That's awesome. So I hope you've enjoyed this 3-part series. And again, we challenge you to email us situations where you say, aha, I bet you Diane and Rick cannot come up with a plan B for this situation. And I'm pretty sure I will.
Uh-huh.
And if I can't, I'll eat my hat.
There you go.
That I don't wear. And I never really understood that.
I don't either.
That phrase.
I don't
what
either.
Does that mean?
I have no idea.
I guess that's do something hard and have to swallow your pride. That's what that means. All right. Well, it was great doing this, and we will talk again next week.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right. Bye. The information contained in this podcast is generic. It must not be misconstrued as constituting legal or psychological advice. Decisions relevant to any specific individual, family system, or case require the direct evaluation of skilled, child-centered professionals.